I told Ginger that if I would have met her 16 years ago, she would have been my agent. So she's a dynamo. She knows how to put things together, and we've had such a great relationship, being able to put this thing all together. And you know, it's so multifaceted. Not only do you have to do the paintings, frame them, ship them, advertise them, put them in catalogs and all of that stuff, you have to have a staff that knows how to put that all together. And that is a huge, huge job. I've been in this business about 65 years now, professionally. And I don't think I've ever had an organization that's run as well as they have done here. And so I think that's a real tribute. And not often does an artist have an opportunity to return to their roots and to be able to give something back in terms of visual material, that you maybe not are all art people, but you can relate to the subject matter and know that that subject matter has meaning and to you as well as to myself as a person who is looking at the aesthetic value of the work. So anyway, I'm very, very appreciative, and Judy and I have been very appreciative of all the time and everything it's taken to put this thing all together. And it's unique. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity to do. I have a good friend who is the editor of Western Art Collector magazine, and when I first told him about this, he got really excited about it because he said, "There is nothing we have ever really done in our publications where an artist had been honored in his own country. Usually they're shunned, you know." So, just a little bit about me, and you can read about all of this, but I'll tell you a few details that maybe aren't there. I grew up on a cattle ranch in eastern Oregon, up in the Medical Springs area, and that's when the town of Pondosa existed as well as the Medical Springs. And that's where I grew up. And I had this propensity toward art for some reason at a very, very early age. And if you will take time today to look over in the back part here, you'll find a painting that was done by Ernest Smith, my father. And that painting hung on our wall for years, and it had a great influence on me. Now, my dad, he loved art, and he thought he might want to do it in his life. But it wasn't in a time and place where artists had the ability to even begin to make a living with that kind of thing. And he loved the outdoors, and he loved ranch life and all of that, so that's the path he chose. He married my mother, who was a long-time resident of Medical Springs. My grandfather was a fellow by the name of Robert Wonker. He came from the Willamette Valley with my grandmother, and they homesteaded that area up there and built 5 ranches, ran as many as 3,000 head of cattle at one time. And it was a big operation. The unfortunate thing about him was he only had 5 daughters. He had no sons. And so as the daughters matured, my dad came from Emmett, Idaho, and his family grew up in Emmett, Idaho. As my dad came out here to work in the mill, he worked in the box factory at night building boxes for ammunition during World War II. And I was just young at the time, very young at the time. And he met my mother, and they stayed, and he got one of the ranches. And my good friend, and maybe one of my only first cousins here tonight, Ron Lay. Ron's back there somewhere. I haven't been able to talk to him yet. But Ron was one of the recipients of the ranches. You know, his family, his kids stayed, and they took over the ranches and so forth. But me, I got the heck out of there, and I said, I don't want to spend my time, running cattle. I wanted to be an artist, and so that's what I set out to do. My brother Larry, who owns a mobile windshield business up in La Grande, also worked on the ranch for a while. I think my dad just got to the point where it was just too difficult to run. Sold out to the Worths family, and anyway, we kind of all moved on, and I became starting a career as a professional artist. It's not easy to become a professional artist and make money at it. It's like climbing a step ladder and falling off a few times as you go down, because not only do you have to paint something people would want enough to buy, it has to be good. And I have so many artist friends out there that have done very well in art, and many don't. Many fall away because it takes a certain kind of unique quality to make things work. And commercialism becomes such a focus for artists, because you have to make a living at it, that you lose your identity and your creative spirit to commercialism. And so there's a balancing act that has to take place between commercialism, because you have to sell the work, and being able to be expressive with what you do. So that takes time. So I spent about 65 years of my professional life trying to figure that out. And I've reached a point, I guess. Judy and I always came back to Eastern Oregon, even though we lived in the Salt Lake City area. We would come back 2 or 3 times a year, and just to refresh myself with the rural spirit of America, because Eastern Oregon represents that so well, you know, and everywhere you go in rural America, you get that feel. But there's something about a spirit here that I recognized very, very early in my life, and I used examples of finding the correct people that I wanted to paint, the landscapes I wanted to paint, and just kind of did my own thing with it. It turned out that my gallery that I was working with in Scottsdale, Arizona, that I worked with for 35 years. I had a one-man show every year for 35 years, and we were doing around somewhere around 35 paintings a year for those shows. So that was a big deal. We put up with things like framing bills and shipping and stuff like that. And I remember one year I got a bill for my framing, and in those days we were putting these nice little brown frames. We were doing painting frames more like the one you see with the sagebush back there. That is 22 karat gold. My framing bill was $60,000 for that show, and that continued for a number of years. So you just have to figure out how to price your work according to a market, and let the market dictate to you as to how your work is going to sell. And I was very, very lucky in that I would have these sellout shows, and every time we sold out, my agent would say, okay, let's raise the prices again. And so that wasn't me, that was my agent, this commercial guy, saying, this is how we're going to do this. And he said, someday I'm going to sell one of your paintings for $1 million. And I said, no. And he didn't. Although he did, he was very, very successful at my shows. And by the time he got some health issues and there were some other things, he had to sell a gallery in 2015. And I moved on and became my own entity out there in the world. And I really appreciated doing that, because it was, I was in control of my life. So the way I have structured my life today is I work with galleries from New York City to Bend, Oregon. Probably 8 galleries altogether. They each get about 6 to 8 paintings. And if they sell one, they get another one. And so I don't do one-man shows anymore. This is the last big show I will have. And so I had 4 places I could have had this show. And to me, taking it back to my roots was an important thing that I wanted to do, and give this back. So you can look at these paintings and say, yeah, there's something here that I can relate to. They're our culture. And commercialism, I never thought about selling paintings at all in this show at all. That was not my motivation. My motivation was to do those paintings and do them the way I wanted them to be and not have that commercialism hanging over your head. So there's always the byproduct, however, that happens to you independently, and it just always happens. So anyway, that's pretty much the way this whole show came about. And it was, I think, 2 years ago, Ginger, what happened to her?
Yeah.
Oh, Ginger. Yeah, it was 2 years ago in September, and I had not, for some weird reason, been in the Crossroads Arts Center. And Judy and I were out doing our 5-miler, and we just happened to drop in, and Ginger introduced herself, and I introduced myself, and she said, "Oh, Gary." I said, "Yeah," I'm kind of looking around. I said, "I'm thinking about maybe having a show, a kind of a retrospective kind of a show, where I can come back to the people of Eastern Oregon that I really do appreciate and have this show." She says, "Well, let's have it here." So that was the catalyst that brought this whole thing together, and we just basically have communicated through that. We've had 2 or 3 trips of hauling stuff back and forth. I saw the savages trying to lift my Superman bronze over here, and I can't lift it myself. And I thought, well, these bronzes, and there's a number of bronzes in here, they're kind of renegade pieces that cropped out of nowhere. It's like, who in the world is going to do a 15-foot statue of Superman for the city of Metropolis, Illinois? And so I was chosen because my first exposure to any kind of art was cartooning. And I followed the cartooning in the papers, and I wanted to be a cartoonist. And I actually did some cartooning in the early 80s. But luckily, I got out of that real fast and moved on. But because of I had collected this collection of original comic strip art. And many of you are old enough to know the comic strips of the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you know. And I had copies of all of those, the original copies. And some of them are very valuable today. And so through some connections, I wound up doing this 15-foot bronze statue of Superman. Now, it was done in 75 pieces, and then bronze welded all back together again. And the little model you see over here is the model that was done actually for the sculpture. And that then became the character that they wanted to know for the Superman in Metropolis, Illinois. And they had to put a traffic line into town because people were coming in to have their picture taken with Superman. And I get these pictures of Obama, I get pictures of celebrities all over having their pictures with around his leg, you know. And I'm standing about here to the statue. And we are taking this Superman on a flatbed truck into Metropolis, Illinois. And it's down south from St. Louis, down on the river around Paducah, Kentucky area. And 25 miles out of town, we were met by a Hell's Angel group who escorted it into town. So we take it into town. We set it up at midnight, and with a drape over it so no one can see it. About 4 o'clock in the morning, a tornado comes through town, takes out all electricity, takes down half the trees in town, takes out the windows downtown, no electricity at all. So CNN comes in with these big generators, and we have the unveiling of Superman. And that kind of set off a chain of events where I got into bronze work, and I did a lot of life-size bronzes. And you'll see the models in here today from a lot of those bronzes. I don't do a lot of bronzes because they're just plain too heavy to haul around and too big to have to deal with. But anyway, so I've had a wide and varied career, and it's still wide and varied. And I will continue working the same as I'm working now. I'll still use my baker connections as a catalyst to produce more work, and it's universal enough that people in New York relate to, my fields and, all of these things, so they become universal enough. Fortunately enough, too, I've been able to get my work into some very famous museums across the country. So museums lift you to a little higher level because people think you're really something and you're really not, But that's kind of how it works in the art world. It is, it's unfortunate. It's kind of like, what do you make for a living? Oh, well, you got to be good. But that's not the case. You can be really good and not do great work, and you can make a lot of money at it. So what do you want? What do I want out of it? I really don't want anything more out of it than just to produce a good body of work based upon my personal feelings. And, Judy sacrificed a great deal in our early youth. We have 4 kids, and actually one of my son, Chris is back here, and his wife, Kirsten, followed us up to make sure that we would make it on time, And Chris, in fact, all of our kids are very creative. Chris and our son Nathan, do animated films, and the beautifully done stuff, and they build sets and all kinds of things like that. And then I have a son-in-law and a daughter that are professional artists and paint also. And so we have, I was a terrible example, both of us. We were a terrible example to our kids. They thought you could actually go through life and enjoy doing what you do. So we're proud of them. We're really proud of what they've done. And that's probably really, to tell you the truth, that's our greatest legacy. Anyway, so do you have any questions or anything? Yes.
Did you go to art school?
I got a degree. I got a degree, a master's degree in art, and I was going to teach. And that's what most artists do, because the only market in art that you have is what you make. And there is no easy answer to that market other than what you produce and can market yourself and sell. So, I got the degrees. I got the master's degrees, all of that kind of stuff. But I don't attribute it to being successful in my art. I attribute it mostly to connections that I make through the education I had, and the biggest thing I equate as being one of the most successful things was being able to go to the great museums of the world and see the best art and why it's considered as great art, and then figure out how to throw all that in the hopper, and let it meld and run and coagulate, and then figure out who I am. So that's basically how it works. I've just been very, very lucky from that standpoint. So anyone else have a question? Yeah.
That your daughter's article about you and that you and your wife started some kind of art colony in Utah. It was up. Did you just find friends and build houses?
Yes, we did. In fact, we had a super support system, because we both graduated Judy was a little later than I. I got drafted during the Vietnam War too, so I went there and spent not there, but I went into the Army at that time, and she stayed home and got her degree. Time we got back, all of her friends were either teaching or they were trying to make it in the art world, and I was able to really kind of see where things were going with that. And I found out that the happier people were those that pursued the things that they wanted to do the most. And so that was one of the real catalysts, and somebody to stand behind you to help you do that. So Judy's a professional clarinetist. She played in the symphony for 40 years, first chair clarinet, and so we had enough of a spirit about creativity and how to make that work with our kids and our family, and just support each other on it. So, and our friends were a great help too. We had, I was counting up just a few months ago that out of all of the friends that I graduated with and her friends that we graduated with in college, we have lost 13 friends of our best friends that have just moved on. And so there's not a lot left of our, the original group there, but we still prize and value those relationships we have. So, and we also have fabulous working relationships with gallery people and people that you are, that you really can trust and that represent you we have the wonderful Eccles family.
Wow.
The Eccles family who have given so much to the culture of Utah. And we're just so much appreciative to what they've done. And Ginger, is there anything you want to say?
No, I think that's Gary. That's Gary.
Yes.
I found it fascinating this morning at the Interpretive Center when you talked about what he did a new painting for this reopening Interpretive Center. That's incredible. It's up the front cover of the Globe we're selling. But talk about what you had in that realm to inspire you about everything you've been that did.
I'm missing the painting.
Take the pictures and the saddle and the how you research painting.
Oh, how I research. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was talking about this up at the it is so interesting how ideas happen. Generally, I do not do preliminary drawings or preliminary paintings, although there's a lot of them in here, and there were reasons for that. But I like to start a painting scratch with my intuition and see where it goes. And the reason I like to do that is I take pictures and all of that stuff, but I don't copy them per se. I use them as a means of getting more of what I want out of a subject. And people that copy photographs look a lot like they copy photographs. And so when you add a personal touch to something, you got to reach inside of yourself and find out what that is. And so when I'm doing a commission type thing, like I did for the Interpretive Center up here, I will probably take 2 weeks and do nothing just but research on what I want, how I want to, or perceive how I want to do it. And I don't always even know what I'm going to do. It kind of comes out as you progress. And the cover of the catalog actually is the painting itself. Yes. And so I wanted to really represent Eastern Oregon, but I also wanted to represent the heritage of the people that came through to the Willamette Valley and try to get it accurate in terms of time and history and so forth. And so sometimes I would do a subject, something in a subject, and I would get someone that knew what they were doing, look at it and say, you got that saddle wrong. And so it's like, okay, go back and research this saddle. So I found on the internet, I found an 1850 saddle. And it was so beautifully done and so different than anything else that we would see today and incorporated in the painting. And then there's some animals in it that were, the dog breed hadn't actually quite gotten to this, hadn't reached the period that it actually came into being. And I got called on things like that. And so you just never know what people see in a piece. So when you do something that site-specific, and that mountain there, that was, I was so taken by, they call it Hunt Mountain, I believe, back here. I don't know why does anybody know why? The Hunts owned it or something?
But Hunt was the leader of the John J. MacArthur party that actually made it on the land route to Astoria.
Okay.
That's why it's neat.
Okay, and I tried to find out where it would have been that the wagons would have turned in the northern part of the valley and actually come over so they could go into the LeGrand area. And so that's why I pointed them this direction from the mountains, because they're coming out of the valley. And the mountain itself is just so beautiful to me because it's just textural and got all of these wonderful rhythmic things going on in it. So I did the pioneers on the cover, and I did today's interpretation with the haystack and so forth, the way it looks today.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Thank you. I love knowing that was so fast.
Yeah. So when you do, a lot of times when you do subject matter that that you're commissioned to do, it just takes a lot of research and time. Probably as much time to do the research as it does to do the painting. Sometimes even more so. And it changes all the way along. There's always something that changes. There you incorporate something new into it, or you take something out of it. And so my job was, and I would, I kind of go overboard a little bit on these things. Like 2 o'clock in the morning, okay, I got to get that thing done. You know, so, and I'll get up, and there were many mornings I was working until from 1 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the morning, and just to see if I could get things in the way I want them to be. So that's just the creative process. That's what we artists go through. So, any other comments or question?
Thank you.
Anyway, I was really honored and happy to make this connection, because this was the perfect catalyst for something like this to happen, and unique, very unique. I couldn't have done this in my home state of Utah today. There's too many great artists there, you know. And excuse me, you got to stand out in some way, you know. You got to do something different. Yeah.
Hey, still one question. In looking at your paintings, there are times that the lines are very crisp, like going in behind. Mm-hmm. And then there are other ones.
Yes.
It almost looks like a impressionist.
Uh-huh. Let me explain to you, and this happens with a lot of artists too. Artists develop style, okay? You can look at an artist and say, exactly, this artist does this sort of thing. Usually the artists that do that sort of thing are the artists that repeat themselves over and over and over and over and over, and you can tell the style in it. That's fine. But I always thought, to be creative, I don't want to change, I want to evolve. And so the evolution was a big, big, big part of my work. And when you see, I have some paintings I've done, some impressionist paintings. I have one painting that took me 16 years to paint, and it's just nothing but a series of dots. And and I learned a lot on that. But I would experiment, and I still experiment today, and I love the idea of experimentation and change, and not change, but evolution. And I teach some of the young people that come to me that want to know how to continue in their art world and to make it in the art world, and say, don't get locked in quickly, because you can lose your identity in your own work, and it becomes a cliche of your work. So it's a difficult thing to evolve and see, but an important part of history. Now, who knows what survives? You know, we don't know in 50 years what artists are going to be on the top of the heap. We don't know that. There's an artist by the name of Maynard Dixon who I really, really captured a lot from, in the way he produced his artwork, and he was such a draftsman and so able to capture an image so quickly and get it exactly right the first time. And I studied, and so many artists today are doing that. Maynard Dixon practically starved to death. Not really, but he sold enough paintings, you know, they got by. But he married a photographer by the name of Dorothea Lange, and he and Dorothea Lange were both famous people. And they influenced each other. Maynard would paint the forgotten man, and she would photograph the forgotten man, and so forth. And so they did a whole series of paintings on that kind of subject matter. But it wasn't until after 50 years after he departed this life, his work began to take on value. Why did it take value? Because it was unique. It was original, and there was just something about the way he was able to interpret and see things that was so amazing and influenced so many people because of it. And his paintings today, you'll find in auctions $1 million plus, and so somebody's reaping the rewards. I got to know his two brothers, or his two sons, Dan and John, and they were both the sons of Dorothea and Maynard. And I did a 7-foot bronze of Maynard that stands out in front of the Museum of the Southwest in Scottsdale, Arizona. 7-foot bronze. There's a model here, over here somewhere. And so many artists today, we're looking for inspiration. We're looking for ways to promote ourselves. We're looking for all of those things, and it's just a lonely road. Really, it's a single and solitary road because you can't piggyback off of someone else. You can find the right people who will say the right things about you, and you can get your work in the right places. But we never know till 50 years after an artist's career whether they have made any statement or whether it'll burn like stubble. So, that's it.